Welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you are joining us today.
Yeah, we really have a truly fascinating journey ahead of us today.
We really do. When you think of a massive business empire, your mind probably jumps straight to modern tech giants.
Right, or maybe historic oil barons.
Exactly. But today, we are looking at an empire built on the most everyday items imaginable.
Things you probably have sitting in your desk drawer right now.
Or your bathroom cabinet right this very second. And we're going to look at how the man behind those items quietly shaped mid-century American culture.
It really is an incredible multi-layered story. We are talking about the life of Patrick Joseph Frawley Jr.
And we have been poring over a comprehensive Wikipedia biographical article that maps out his sprawling business portfolio.
The sheer scale of his reach is staggering. It is a perfect study in how corporate power functioned in the 20th century.
Our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly that. We are going to trace how a high school dropout managed to build a massive business portfolio.
One that spanned from PaperMate pens to Schick razors.
All the way to Technicolor and eventually into a massive conservative media and film empire.
It is a wild ride.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with his incredibly unique origins. Because he didn't exactly start out on Wall Street, did he?
Not at all. His background is entirely unconventional for an American corporate titan of that era. Frawley was born in 1923 down in Leon, Nicaragua.
Wow, Nicaragua.
Yeah, and his heritage was wonderfully diverse. His father was Irish-born, and his mother was of French-Spanish descent.
Right, and even though he was born in Nicaragua, he actually grew up in San Francisco.
He did.
But I read in the sources that he didn't stay there for his education.
That's right. He actually dropped out of high school as a teenager.
Just left entirely.
Yeah, but he didn't just run away or drift aimlessly. He moved back to Nicaragua, specifically to learn the ways of business directly from his father.
So he opted for a hands-on, real-world education in commerce.
Instead of a traditional classroom, yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
He essentially traded a high school diploma for an apprenticeship in international trade.
It was a bold move.
And then global circumstances stepped in. When World War II broke out, Frawley wanted to serve.
Right.
But how did a kid born in Nicaragua and raised in San Francisco end up flying for Canada?
It comes back to his father. Because his father held United Kingdom citizenship, Frawley was legally able to enlist in the Royal Canadian Air Force during the war.
That is fascinating.
It really highlights how internationally connected his life was from the very beginning.
Definitely.
After the war wrapped up in 1945, he married a Canadian woman named Geraldine.
And the newlyweds then decided to settle down back in San Francisco.
Which sets the stage for his first massive leap into the business world.
Because the post-war economic boom is just kicking off.
Exactly.
America is transitioning from a wartime economy to a consumer economy, and Frawley is right there looking for an opportunity.
And he finds one in a rather unexpected place.
A defaulted loan, right?
Exactly. Shortly after the war, Frawley found a ballpoint pen parts manufacturer that had defaulted on its loan.
So he swooped in.
He acquired the struggling business and renamed it the Frawley Pen Company.
Now, I want to pause here because we have to put ourselves in the shoes of a consumer in the late 1940s.
Right. Pens were a hassle back then.
They really were messy. Fountain pens leaked everywhere.
And the early ballpoints were notorious for smudging and skipping across the page.
So Frawley didn't just buy a pen company to make the same old product. He drove some serious innovation right.
He fundamentally changed the product. In 1949, the Frawley Pen Company developed an ink that dried instantly.
Which was a huge deal.
A massive quality of life upgrade for the average consumer. No more smudged documents or ink-stained hands.
But the true stroke of genius came the following year.
By 1950, the company claimed to have created the very first pen with a retractable ballpoint tip.
They dubbed it the PaperMate.
Yes, they did.
I want you, our listener, to think about that for a second. Picture the last time you were sitting in a meeting or on a phone call, mindlessly clicking a retractable pen.
Click, click, click.
Exactly. That satisfying little mechanism that protects the ink without needing a separate cap.
It is ubiquitous now.
You are literally holding Patrick Frawley's legacy in your hand.
It was the perfect product for a culture that was just beginning to embrace fast, disposable, convenient consumer goods.
It was a monumental success. He solved a highly practical problem and commercialized it perfectly.
And the financial reward for that innovation was staggering. In 1955, the Frawley Pen Company was acquired by the Gillette Company.
For $15.5 million.
Yes. That acquisition actually formed the entire basis for Gillette's PaperMate division.
$15.5 million in 1955.
Hmm.
Adjusted for inflation, that is an absolute fortune.
A life-changing generational windfall.
Most people would take that money, buy an island, and never look at a balance sheet again.
What's fascinating here is that Frawley did the exact opposite.
He didn't just retire with his millions.
He immediately turned around and used those profits to buy controlling shares in two incredibly iconic brands.
Schick, the razor company, and Technicolor Inc., the famous motion picture film company.
So he's not cashing out.
He is actively leveling up. He's building an empire across consumer goods and Hollywood tech.
But just as he is sitting at the absolute pinnacle of corporate America, global politics crash right into his boardroom.
Let's talk about 1958, because this is a major plot twist in Frawley's story.
It is a profound turning point. In 1958, Fidel Castro's revolution takes hold in Cuba.
Right.
And amidst that political upheaval, the new Cuban government takes over a Schick manufacturing factory located on the island.
Now, for a massive corporation, losing a single factory is obviously a headache.
You have to reroute your supply chain, you lose some equipment.
But the sources point out that for Frawley, this wasn't just a line item on a balance sheet. It wasn't just a business loss.
No, it was deeply personal. According to the biographical sources, this specific event fundamentally awakened him politically.
It shifted his entire worldview.
He saw firsthand how a shift in geopolitical ideology could directly strip him of his private property and disrupt his business.
And from that moment forward, Frawley became a dedicated advocate and a major financial backer for anti-communist causes.
He really threw his weight behind it.
Now, to be completely clear with you, our listener, we are looking purely at the historical record here to understand the mechanics of his impact.
Right.
We aren't taking any political sides. The sources simply map out a very specific pattern of financial support that grew out of this ideological shift in 1958.
Precisely. The historical facts show that Frawley, alongside Walter Knott, provided significant financial support to Barry Goldwater's 1964 presidential campaign.
And listeners might recognize Walter Knott as the founder of the Knott's Berry Farm theme park.
Yes.
Exactly. He didn't stop at presidential campaigns either.
He funded Fred Schwartz's anti-communist rallies.
And even before the Goldwater campaign back in 1961, he provided funds to the Information Council of the Americas,
also known as INCA, which was a prominent anti-communist organization.
This represents a remarkable synthesis of international geopolitics intersecting directly with American corporate leadership.
You have a man who made his fortune in everyday consumer goods, like click pens and shaving razors,
Who transforms into a behind-the-scenes political heavyweight, specifically because of a geopolitical event in Cuba.
He weaponized his corporate wealth, turning it into the engine for his ideological advocacy.
It really illustrates how deeply interconnected the business world and the political world were becoming during the height of the Cold War.
Absolutely.
But while Frawley was navigating these massive global currents, he was also fighting some very intense private battles.
He was.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources reveal a much more vulnerable personal side of the man.
Yes. Despite his immense outward success, Frawley struggled deeply with alcohol addiction.
And his approach to treating his addiction was, frankly, as uniquely Frawley as his approach to business.
In 1964, seeking help, he checked himself into the Schadel Sanatorium in Seattle.
And he went there specifically to undergo something called aversion therapy. Can you explain what that entails?
Aversion therapy is a psychological treatment where a patient is exposed to a stimulus, in this case alcohol, while simultaneously being subjected to some form of discomfort.
Okay.
The goal is to condition the patient's brain to associate the alcohol with the negative feeling, thereby breaking the addiction.
That sounds intense.
And it's a very intense approach.
Intense, but for Frawley, it clearly had a profound impact.
It did.
Because he found the treatment so incredibly valuable that he didn't just write a glowing testimonial for the doctors.
He literally bought the hospital.
He bought the hospital.
That is correct. He purchased the sanatorium on behalf of Schick and officially renamed it Schick Schadel.
Hold on, I have to stop you there. He used the profits from Schick, a publicly known razor company, to buy his own rehab center.
Yes, he did.
How does that even work? How does a corporate board of directors allow a CEO to just purchase a hospital because he personally liked the treatment?
It is a stunning example of mid-century corporate power. Today, a move like that would face immense scrutiny from shareholders and regulators regarding conflicts of interest.
Undoubtedly.
But analytically, it highlights an incredible blurring of Frawley's personal life and his corporate acquisitions.
He used his corporate apparatus to acquire a medical facility that addressed a deeply personal challenge.
It's the ultimate expression of consumer satisfaction.
I like the product so much I bought the company.
Exactly. But you're right. It shows that for Frawley, his business empire wasn't just a portfolio of detached investments.
It was increasingly becoming a direct reflection of his own life, experiences, his values, and even his personal healing.
And that blurring of the personal and the professional sets the stage for his next massive pivot.
Because as we move into the late 1960s, Frawley isn't just satisfied with pens, razors, and hospitals.
He decides to build a media empire to broadcast his worldview.
And once again, he uses that corporate umbrella to do it.
In 1967, Frawley establishes the Twin Circle Publishing Co.
But he sets it up as a subsidiary of the Schick Investment Corps.
So there's Schick again funding a completely different industry.
This is where we see his ideological shift, the one sparked by that lost factory in Cuba, fully manifest in the public sphere.
Through Twin Circle Publishing, he founded a Catholic weekly newspaper called Twin Circle.
But he knew print wasn't enough on its own.
By 1970, this media operation had expanded into daily radio broadcasts and a weekly half-hour television show.
All of these platforms were dedicated to espousing Frawley's conservative Catholic views.
He also took over the publication of the National Catholic Register newspaper.
The National Catholic Register acquisition is particularly notable, right?
Yes. When Frawley assumed control, he explicitly changed its editorial focus.
He shifted the paper away from its previously progressive stance to a strictly conservative one.
He wasn't just funding media, he was actively shaping the theological and political discourse within his religious community.
So he's funding newspapers, radio, and television aimed at adults. Did he stick strictly to traditional news and religious media?
Actually, no. He went after younger demographics and popular culture, too.
In 1967, he bought Gilberton's classic illustrated line of comic books from its founder, Albert Cantor.
He operated this under the name the Frawley Corporation.
For those who might not remember, Classics Illustrated was a massive brand that adapted famous literary classics into comic book format.
Frawley published the final titles of the original series in 1969.
Specifically titles like In Freedom's Cause and Negro Americans.
However, the print line of those comics faded by the early 70s.
After that, he mainly concentrated on foreign sales and reprinting older titles.
But Frawley was already pivoting again.
He's got his hands in print, radio, and TV, but then he sets his sights on Hollywood.
In 1971, he co-founded Schick Sun Classic Pictures in Park City, Utah,
alongside Charles E. Sellier Jr. and Raylan Jensen.
Notice the name once more. Schick Sun Classic Pictures.
The corporate foundation of the Razor Company is once again funding a totally new venture.
This time, independent film production. This company produced indie feature films, documentaries, and made-for-television movies.
And he actually leveraged that Classics Illustrated brand he'd bought a few years earlier.
Between 1977 and 1982, Schick Sun Classic Pictures produced a bunch of TV films based on those classic stories.
We're talking about adaptations of The Time Machine, Donner Past the Road to Survival, and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are looking at a masterclass in platform building and vertical integration.
Frawley systematically constructed a pipeline across nearly every major communication medium of the era.
From print newspapers and comic books, to daily radio, to weekly television, and finally to independent film production.
He built an entire self-sustaining ecosystem to convey his worldview to the American public.
It's breathtaking when you lay out the mechanics of it.
He is taking the profits from your morning shave and using them to fund the newspaper you read, the radio show you listen to on your commute, and the movie you watch on a Friday night.
But empires of this size, built on the sheer force of one man's will, are incredibly difficult to maintain.
And the sources show that the early 1970s marked a major shift in Frawley's control over his domain.
Yes, the timeline here is critical. The year 1970 was a massive turning point, and it wasn't a positive one for Frawley.
That was the year Schick, the company that had been the primary financial engine for so many of his side ventures, became a subsidiary of Warner Lambert.
Losing control of Schick is huge. That's his piggy bank.
But that wasn't the only devastating loss that year. In 1970, he also lost control of Technicolor.
The sources mention that a Canadian producer named Harry Saltzman actually won control of the company from Chairman Frawley in a proxy fight.
Wait, how does a Canadian producer win a proxy fight to take a company away from its own chairman? What exactly happens in a scenario like that?
A proxy fight is essentially a corporate coup.
Okay.
It happens when a group of shareholders join forces to try and vote out the current corporate management.
Instead of needing to own the majority of the shares outright, the challenger convinces other shareholders to let him use their votes.
Exactly. They used their proxy at the corporate meeting.
So Saltzman successfully rallied enough shareholder dissatisfaction to outvote Frawley and remove him from power.
Wow. So in a single year, the financial engine of Schick is absorbed by another conglomerate, and he is ousted from Technicolor by his own shareholders.
That has to be a jarring reality check for a guy who had been unilaterally calling the shots for decades.
Losing control of two major pillars of his portfolio in a single year certainly changed the landscape of his influence.
He no longer had that endless stream of consumer goods capital to instantly fund any new hospital or movie studio he wanted.
However, he didn't disappear. He remained heavily involved in his media ventures for quite some time.
Right, he held on to the ideological media pieces.
It wasn't until much later in life, in 1995, that Frawley finally sold the National Catholic Register and the renamed Catholic Twin Circle.
He sold them to the Legion of Christ.
And just 3 years after selling off those final pieces of his media empire, Patrick Frawley passed away on November 3, 1998 in Santa Monica, California.
He was 75 years old.
He left behind quite a legacy, not just in the corporate world, but personally.
He had a massive family tree. A sister, 2 sons, 5 daughters, and 20 grandchildren.
It is a remarkable sweep of a life.
You have a teenager who left high school to learn business in Nicaragua, who grows up to be a patriarch with 20 grandchildren in California.
Having left a permanent mark on almost every major industry in between.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at the whole picture, we've traced the journey of a man who saw a problem with messy ink and revolutionized the way the world writes.
By inventing the retractable PaperMate pen,
He parlayed that fortune into razors and film technology.
he experienced a geopolitical shock in Cuba that turned him into a major Cold War political funder.
He possessed the sheer corporate audacity to buy a hospital to cure his own addiction.
And ultimately built a massive multi-platform media ecosystem.
It is a profound story of cause and effect and the unseen forces that shape our culture.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, drawing directly from the mechanics of the empire we've discussed today.
Consider how a single isolated incident, a razor company losing just one manufacturing factory in Cuba in 1958, didn't merely change a corporate bottom line.
It acted as a profound catalyst. The loss of that factory pushed Frawley to actively fund and shape the American media landscape of the Cold War.
It really makes you wonder how many of the cultural touchstones, the news outlets and the media platforms we consume today are actually the unseen ripple effect of a CEO's personal behind-the-scenes experiences.
That is such an incredible perspective. It really makes you look at the world and the media we consume a little bit differently.
The next time you click a pen, you might just be holding a piece of Cold War history. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Patrick Frawley.
We hope you enjoyed exploring these sources with us.
And as always, keep asking questions and stay curious.